All right, I think we're ready to get started. Yeah, we're at 10:45, so and then we're going to try to, actually, I don't know if there's, is that too loud back there? Can you guys hear me? We don't have a mic in this room, so do our best to project. So I'm Jill Morris. I'm the Executive Director at the PALCI Consortium, which is, yeah, if you wouldn't mind, thank you so much, Ms. Morris. I'm the Executive Director at the PALCI Consortium, which is the Pennsylvania Academic Library Consortium, inclusive of libraries in 4 states, actually. So New York, New Jersey, and West Virginia. And I'm here with Kirsten. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Kirsten Leonard. I'm the Executive Director of PALNI, which is the Private Academic Library Network of Indiana. So we have 24 small colleges in Indiana.
So, so today we're going to talk about a project that we've been embarking on together for a couple of years actually now. So since 2017, our 2 consortia have been exploring opportunities to work on an institutional repository exploration, I suppose, together to try and determine how we could better serve our member libraries who are looking for solutions in this space. And for those of you, I am curious before we go too far into this, how many of you are at libraries where you run an institutional repository of some type? Okay, how many are actively seeking other IR solutions at the moment? A couple? Okay, great. So we were in that same state at the consortial level where we were hearing from our members that there was a need, and Kirsten is going to describe some of those needs in more detail in a little bit. But we were trying to find a solution that met a couple of core needs, was going to help us with cost containment, was going to help us be a really scalable solution, and one that we could innovate on and contribute to in some way. And so we embarked on this sort of project where we were trying to figure out what solution was going to best meet the needs of our 2 groups, and could we work together. We early on determined we had a shared vision for the types of services we wanted to be able to provide through an institutional repository. And so we together started exploring whether or not something was going to be possible here. And what ended up happening was we applied for an IMLS grant and were awarded the funding to help contribute to this project that we're going to tell you about today. So we're going to talk to you about the institutional repository itself, what the needs of our libraries were, and then we're also going to talk to you about some of the benefits and challenges that come with cross-consortial collaboration. And for those of you that work in consortia or work with consortia in some way, you know that there's been more cross-consortial collaboration and partnership happening than ever before. We're finding new ways of working together. So we're going to talk a little bit about that because we think we have some good insights into how you might approach it if it's something that you're interested in. So lastly, we're just going to try to give you some sense of what Haiku is all about, where it is. If it's something you're interested in, we can give you some idea sort of what's possible in Haiku. And I'm going to slide. So as I mentioned earlier, we did receive funding for an IMLS grant. This was actually not where we started, though. Kirsten and I had been working together talking about IRs for a couple of years prior to that and had hosted conversations within the Haiku community. And we had gone down a path of realizing that Haiku, the software we're going to talk to you about today, which is an open source institutional repository software, seemed to be a really good option that we wanted to explore further. And so we did some early exploration, just the 2 of us on our own, and Kirsten had some funding that was set aside that she could contribute to sort of a phase 1 of this project together. So we tried to figure out ways that we could collectively support our 94 libraries that we represent as these 2 consortia and meet this broad array of needs. Once we had done that sort of initial exploration, we went to the phase where we went and applied through the National Leadership for Libraries grants process for IMLS funding, and we were fortunate enough to be awarded funds to work on a project here. So this is an 18-month project. The primary partners are Kirsten's consortium, the PALNI Academic Libraries, and then the PALCI Academic Library Consortium. We have another partner in Notch 8, who is our development group, where they are doing a large amount of the development effort, really. Kirsten has some development effort staff available, capacity available in her group as well. But Not Jade is a development group based out of San Diego, California, and they're really active in contributing to the community that supports Haiku. And some of you may have heard of Samvera. How many of you have heard of Samvera before? Okay, so they're a large open source community, and Haiku sort of falls under their umbrella in terms of the software that's produced. Not Jade is a leader in that and an active contributor, and that is one thing that I want to call attention to and give them kudos for, is how much they contribute back to the community in terms of leading it, and then also the code that they are creating. They have commercial interest, clearly. They're hoping to offer services around Haiku to the library community, but they're also very interested in making sure that they are contributing back. And we really liked that. We felt like that was important, and we would suggest that, you know, if you're working on any open source project, that be something you really look for, especially if you're in libraries looking for a developer working on any kind of open source project. It's so important to have that community be a core part of what you're trying to do. Otherwise, we hear about these open source projects that kind of fall flat after a little while and aren't sustainable. And if you haven't developed some of those commercial partnerships and developed and really written in intentionally that you're going to contribute things back to that community, that's when you run the risk of things becoming less sustainable. So we felt like that was a really important thing for us, and we've really enjoyed working with Not Jade on Haiku. So this is where I'm going to turn it over to Kirsten, and she's going to tell us a little bit more about sort of how we got here.
Yes. All right. So I'll go into each of these slides, so don't worry about reading all of the detail in this, but this is kind of in a nutshell what we're trying to accomplish with this tool compared to the other tools that are out there right now. Yes. So repository landscape. So some of you are already in repositories. People have been looking at repositories. PALNI has been, we have had a task force looking at repositories since 2012. And kept looking because we couldn't find what we needed to have. What we're seeing right now, and I imagine some of you here as well, some of the solutions that are out there still require a lot of development effort. They're siloed, they're expensive to run, they don't necessarily keep up with the times in terms of what user expectations are. So that those challenges, we've looked at several different systems. PALNI in particular also has a partnership with WRLC around Islandora, because that was the closest thing that we could find as a temporary solution. But even that, the learning curve on that, the amount of time and effort it is to do it well was higher than what our libraries could do. So the hosted solutions right now tend to be proprietary systems. They're expensive. You can't adapt them to your particular needs. We've got a lot of changes that are happening, both in how we want to run our systems as well as the content that we want to put in their systems. And to the next one. So one of the particular things, it's not just small libraries that are, thank you.
Yeah.
Are you clicking?
Yep.
Thank you. I'm holding the clicker and not clicking.
We are deeply collaborative.
We are deeply collaborative. Just read my mind and get it done here. Yes, totally. So as I mentioned, I'm executive director of PALNI, which is small colleges. And so I have some very small seminaries that are 50 FTE. The largest I have is around 5,700 FTE. So when we say small, they're small. But as I mentioned, large institutions are also looking in Haiku in a better way to run IRs. UVA just announced their grant that they have with funding from Arcadia to look at Haiku as well. So it's not, no matter your size, you don't have enough resources right now in libraries to be able to do this activity. But in particular, PALNI has been moving along this road of deep collaboration for a long time. And we have some of our institutions, some of our better funded institutions, DePauw and Butler University have digital commons. There's the big Brexit thing to get out of digital commons, but really it's budget pressures. It's budget pressures, they're running it by themselves. We have a little bit of an interest group to help them develop workflows, but the idea that because of the declining enrollments we're facing in the Midwest and the Northeast, we're looking at solutions that allow us to work together more effectively. DSpace was just beyond our capacity to do at the consortial level, even let alone individually, and we just felt like we'd constantly be trying to play catch up to what the users demand there, so we just didn't go in that direction. So I mentioned we've been looking since 2012. Literally we've had task force at every year. What's going on? Is there anything there yet? What do we need? One of the things that we did do was develop a vision statement. So if you go to palni.edu or just search PALNI and IR vision, you'll get that document that went through what we needed to see in a system because we couldn't find it anywhere out there. And then we were paying attention to the MLS grant funded project that DSpace and Duraspace and remind me who the other
Oh, I'm sorry, DPLA and Stanford.
at Stanford, and then PALCI were involved in that, looking at a consortial solution. We're like, yes, this is it. This is what we want to see happen. But so in that core vision statement, one of the key things that we determined that we needed at PALNI as a group to make this sustainable, to actually be worthwhile to do for our level of institutions, was that it had to be multi-tenant and really multi-tenant. And I hear a lot of solutions say they're multi-tenant. They're not fully multi-tenant. I mean, there's still a lot of things that have to be done the same way, or they really, you can't provide all of the functionality in it, or it's a lot of work to make them multi-tenant. You may have some provider who's providing them together, which definitely raises efficiencies, but you're still, doing updates in multiple systems, et cetera. So we wanted something that was multi-tenant. We wanted something that would centralize our administration for it, so we didn't have to administer it at the individual levels. We wanted something that we could adapt, so not a closed system that only met a certain set of needs. Because we're small, we didn't necessarily have the voice. We wanted to make sure our needs were going to be met in that case. And then, as I mentioned, deep collaboration. So we have a metadata expert at Butler University. They do our metadata mapping. We may have a UX, we have a UX team that has people from multiple institutions. So when we do a new interface for the front end for our end users, those people get involved. Well, how hard is it to hand off permissions to get in there to be able to do it from one to the other? We want a system that, while we want to maybe brand things differently and do some pieces differently, we want to be able to manage it collectively across the staff from our institutions. So, thank you. As I mentioned, we considered Islandora going to a hosted solution with Discovery Garden, but we found there, even PALNI at that time, we didn't have a scholarly communication director. Most of our schools didn't have scholarly communication people. We didn't have the bandwidth. And we didn't even have the bandwidth to be able to articulate to Discovery Garden what we needed. You know what I mean? Even managing somebody external requires a lot of time, right? You want to say you want to develop this, you need to understand what they're presenting back to you. We did partner with another consortia who's got that going, but even then we're finding, because we've got 24 institutions who need to brand differently, it doesn't scale. I don't know, we won't be able to do it for all 24 institutions. So Haiku still has a number of different things about it that I think are going to be a better solution for us long term. As we talked about deep collaboration amongst consortia is the next thing that has to happen and has been happening in various ways for a long time because of ICOL, the International Consortium of Library, or International Coalition of Library Consortia. I need my coffee. Remind me of words. But this idea of deliberately partnering to provide services at this level, I think, is accelerating much more so in the last few years. So in our case, we're definitely looking to provide services in conjunction with other consortia to take on these big challenges, but yet they're ones that are forced on containing our costs, right? So what we can take on to be able to manage the needs but manage the costs. And as Jill had mentioned, the partnerships extend beyond other consortia to other organizations that have similar needs, similar missions and goals in the way that they work, and NotJ was definitely one that fit our goal. I mean, they were all right up front. When we contract with somebody to do development work, we want to make sure we're feeding it back into the open source community, and we want to make sure that that's clear, and it's in our contract, but NotJ initiated that discussion, that's part of what they want to do. So there's definitely not this sense of we're going to check a whole bunch of money at this and then pretty soon be locked out because prices were going up. We want to be in an ecosystem, that can sustain itself, but yet is also focused on containing costs. And the other thing is, when I talked about common goals or common needs, IRs, I think, need to evolve. One of the things, open educational resources, is one, there's really not a good container for that in what is being produced by the individual institutions. One of the activities that I do as executive director is go around and meet with the dean's councils, the presidents, the vice provosts, and the CFOs of our institutions, and one of the things that they were interested in was an OER space that they could put their content, that they could adapt it, that they could brand it, they could comment on it, and they wanted to be able to share that across like institutions that they were collaborating with at that level. So this need, there's nowhere for that, you know what I mean? There's nowhere for that. So this was something that could serve multiple needs, but that immediate need of OER, affordable education initiatives, was one of the key ones. The other one was ETDs, and so that, again, surfacing visibility of our student research and faculty research was the other key component of that. We aligned, we were both looking for those things at the same time.
And can I just
Yep,
add,
absolutely.
one other thing that I think was really important was that we wanted to create this container, this space to put stuff, but we really wanted that stuff to be surfaceable in other discovery areas. We want to connect into national frameworks wherever possible, especially in the OER space. So we aren't looking to create this new space that is, is yet another silo, but one that we hope will actually populate out into all of the frameworks that already exist.
And also connect backwards into it.
Yep.
Yep. So,
Sorry.
there we go. So the benefits of cross-consortial collaboration, obviously sharing costs was the big thing. We PALNI funded the first one. I had end-of-year funds, went into this, got to spend it. We spun up a development contract pretty quickly with Notch 8. The grant funding, we did the IMLS together, and I'll tell you, PALNI with our, we have more staff than you do, but we don't have the experience in grant seeking that they did. So Jill was like the spearheader of that. I mean, we got that IMLS grant because of Jill and her expertise. So already we're sharing that deep expertise across consortia to make sure we can get this done. The scale, obviously all of ours together made a difference. Even the IMLS grant review committees made a comment about the number of libraries that were going to be touched by this, and that was of interest to them, that we were looking to produce something also not only for our two consortia, but for all the consortia that are out there to be able to send this out. That expertise I mentioned, risk is another big part of this, so we're putting money into this. If it flops, well, I can blame Jill.
Right back at
And it really is fun. I mean, this is the key part. I mean, we're good partners, but I think that sense of being able to balance the craziness that you're encountering off of somebody else is always a good fun thing to do.
Yeah, and the timing of when we were working on this was such that you had a little more bandwidth to put toward one of these things than I did at the moment.
Yeah.
It just worked really nicely. It would never have gotten done if we had not, shared
You
some
take
of
this, I'll
the
take
burden
this. Yeah.
of setting this up. So.
Well, and one other group I want to mention too, the British Library Group is another one. We do a monthly water cooler, so they're working with Ubiquity. We're working with Notch 8, and then it's us two library groups kind of talking together about what are you doing, what is your focus on development, so we're not duplicating effort, kind of generating ideas off of each other, so we're fueling, trying to build kind of a user group community as well as the development community. And we do attend the monthly development community conversations as well, and it's a good community. I mean, they're trying to do the same thing, like where they're not duplicating effort and kind of building something that's going to be sustainable.
Yeah, I would just add one other thing there where, the development effort in an open source community, obviously there are lots of people working on this software. And so the conversations that we attend around the developer community about who's doing what, there's a lot of coordinated effort that's happening there behind the scenes so that, that you're feeding into a version that you are going to be able to benefit from another person's work. And so our talks with the British Library, where they've got a group of 5 institutions working on building out Haiku as their institutional repository for the British Library, the British Museum, there's National Library of Scotland, there's 5 groups. That has been so helpful to us, and that was an unintended sort of benefit and perk that we didn't realize when we were going in. And once we realized we're all working on the same thing, we were really excited about how those benefits could just keep growing exponentially each time.
And there's a growing number of people in this space, which is encouraging as well.
Right.
Good. Oh, we went right into the challenges, didn't we?
Yes,
Yeah, so anybody who runs a consortium knows that expectation setting and consistent communication across the consortia is a challenge. Do that across 2 consortia that are separated by a whole state. We still need to somehow grab Ohio and get them involved in this too, I think. But so that definitely extends the challenges. I mean, we're early on, and so in some ways the MLS grant has been a focusing agent for us, right? We've got a scope for that project. The governance, we're not fully in the full end governance stage of this, but the management of this is another one who's got what responsibilities, but as we're starting to spin up our advisory groups to make sure that we're actually building something that really is going to meet their needs and making sure that we're doing it across a broad, swath of different library types and different library particular uses, having that structure in place to do that. When we get closer towards actually going towards production, then we're going to have to talk about the work teams, you know what I mean? So are we going to divide who wants to do what? How is that expertise going to happen? In PALNI land, we've always done this. We want to try to do together as much together as possible, but you don't have to. And so there's that sense of opt-in, and usually people opt in because, as it is, you're not getting more people, usually you're getting more work. And so you're trying to figure out how to divide that work yourself.
I think you got it. No, you got it. That's good.
So I talked a little bit about that. The high trust is a key part of that. So going into this with a consortia who's kind of built that trust about somebody else can make this decision because the timing needs to be done, that decision needs to be done quickly, that you know each other well enough to make the right decisions in that. The similar goals and articulating your goals are a key part of that. Figuring out what the urgency levels are for your institutions. I mean, on one hand, ours have wanted this since 2012, so yeah, it's urgent. But we had finding other solutions for those that are very urgent so you don't lose them off some other path permanently. So making sure if they need to do a temporary solution that you're scaffolding them to get back into the joint project or to be able to, should they choose to, is another piece of that. Human resources, the money, the funding was very helpful. I think the IMLS grant also gave it a gravitas to the project that everybody was saying, yeah, all right, this is a real thing and it's worth contributing to. Anything else you want to say about that?
No, I mean, I think that Kirsten and we share, because our consortia are sort of funded similarly, I think that is one other piece where we have some similar infrastructure. We're both 501c3s and we have sort of some similar expectations, I guess, from our members, kind of about the types of things we're going to be involved with and helping them with. And so I think having that sort of underlying everything else was a really nice thing that helped us overcome some of those challenges. I mean, we're meeting over Zoom all the time. We have project teams over here and over there. We did build in some travel money and from our IMLS funding to help bring people together. And to bring people to conferences, to be able to learn and become connected as part of the bigger Sambera community, which is, again, that umbrella group that does Haiku. And having that is helpful because you need those relationships in place and building trust where, people don't know each other yet, but they're going to get a chance to know each other through this process. So,
but I just want to say, I mean, this looks like a lot of inputs to it, but it's definitely worth it. Considering how much it takes to do this well, the cost of the system is actually really a very small part of it. When you're building a community around that, then you get all of the sharing about how do you do outreach to your faculty, what's your marketing material that you're doing, how can we brand this together, hey, this is a big project. So there's a lot of benefits to the end user about doing it this way.
So I want to give you just a little bit more detail about what is Haiku and why did we decide to go with this as an institutional repository solution for ourselves. And so Haiku, just a little bit of very high level background. Some of you may have heard of HiRax, which is another institutional repository solution from, again, the Sambera community that is not, it's a single tenant type of solution. It's not a multi-tenant solution like the one that we're talking about here. Haiku is almost like an offshoot of HiRax, if you want to think of it that way, where they're basically setting it up to be really easy to create new repositories in that multi-tenant kind of framework. where every institution gets their own IR tenant as part of the system that is separate from everybody else's. And we selected this one because it really was the only truly multi-tenant solution out there. And it still is in terms of what's available in open source software. And so we selected this one because we really needed that scale that multi-tenancy provides, and it's baked into the software. There are challenges that come along with that because some of what we're trying to do is, as Kirsten mentioned, to consolidate that administration piece, which means that there's a little less customization available to you in terms of what an individual institution who is just running like Hyrax, for example, might do if they just said, well, what I'm doing isn't impacting any other tenant in the system. So we have to talk about workflows, but there are managed workflows, there are managed work types, which are the types of items that you might put into an institutional repository, and the sky's the limit in terms of what you can put into this system. And we mentioned two things that we scoped at the very beginning: open educational resources, which can be just about anything, and then we talked about electronic theses and dissertations as being our two focus areas, because we had heard those needs, and also because we knew there was grant money potentially associated, especially with the OER work that we were doing, and affordable education being a hot topic right now for all libraries. And so we really kind of honed in on those two as our initial scope. Haiku as an institutional repository, right out of the box, supports only two work types that you're going to put in. One is like a generic work type that could be anything, and then another is an image. And so beyond that, there's a lot of work that we have to do as a community to talk about what are those work types that we need to support our libraries in putting in the types of items that they need, so that we can then benefit from everybody having them in the same system in some way.
And work is underway in that area. British Library Group did 12 work types, I think, that they're going to be contributing back. We talked about whether or not there needs to be some kind of repository of the work types so people could take them and adapt them if the British use a different terminology or a different process for theirs than ours, but you don't start from scratch, right? You've got something to adapt.
Right. So Haiku doesn't automatically inherit all of the things that have been developed for Hyrax, and that is something that we talk about within the community. How do we make the Haiku community really streamlined in terms of what development has happened for Hyrax being beneficial to the Haiku community as well? And so we're working on that. That's something that is a problem in any open source project. It's a challenge to overcome so that you can make sure that development efforts aren't wasted in any way. But it is a slightly different take on an institutional repository when you're approaching it from multi-tenancy first. We were really excited about the capabilities related to roles and permissions. You know, if I have an institution in my membership who wants to put something in there that they want to lock down and they don't want to show to anybody, they can do that. If they want to show it only to their patrons, they can do that. If they want to open it up and show it to my consortium and Kirsten's consortium, great. If they want to show it to the world, they can do that too. So having that level, those different levels of permissions and the ability to customize workflows for whoever it is that's depositing into the repository itself, whatever it is, and depending on what it is, it's going to be somebody different. It might be a librarian, it might be a faculty member, it could be any number of people. So we had some ability to really shape those workflows and to share them.
And that was our first big development sprint in there. We now have that ability to assign a role, many different roles to any type of collection that gets, regardless of whose consortium and whose library, you can do that now.
Another really important aspect of Haiku was our ability to brand the tenants of the IR as the institutions. And I'm going to show you a good example of that in a few moments. But we heard over and over again, I heard from my libraries, Jill, we need a solution that looks like our own. And you know, it's nice if it connects up into the PALCI space, but that's not what my administration is really looking for. I need to be able to customize it to the extent that it's going to look like part of my library's website, and so that nobody questions kind of what it is that we're putting our stuff into. And so we heard that loud and clear, and in fact that was part of why my consortium became involved in Haiku in the first place, was that was the promise of it. There was going to be this ability to customize, brand, create it in such a way that it was easy enough to make it look like your own IR, truly independent from everything else that's happening. We're really excited about the possibilities related to cross-institution searching. So especially in the OER space where we are hoping to put materials out there, we want our community to use this as a connection point and be able to share what's happening in one institution with what's happening in another institution, and to look and see who are my neighbors down, the street or down in the next state over who are working on some of these things. And to connect people together in that way. And so the British Library was working on some of this as well, working on the searching development, and we hope to be able to benefit from some of that. We talked a lot about DOI services, so being able to assign DOIs to ETDs, being able to integrate those services cross-ref, or, and I'm totally blanking on the other big one right now.
DataSite.
Thank you, DataSite. And actually, we've got some integration already because of the work that the British Library has done in that frame. And DataSite in particular, that's going to be really easy to integrate and to take what's been built and to plug it in there. To assign DOIs and to be able to take and scale that service in addition to supplying the place to put something is really exciting. And many of us deposit our ETDs in commercial spaces for just that reason, right? And then we give up, and we have to buy them back. Other libraries have to go out and buy those ETDs from other places if we want to get access to what you all have without searching each individual institution or repository that you all have on your campus. So isn't that great if we can put it in here and then serve up all of those DOIs into other discovery channels? And so that's a huge reason why we focus on ETDs first, as something that we felt like we could have an impact there. One of my libraries actually came to me and said, gosh, we're putting all this stuff in there, and now all of my other colleagues in other schools are having to buy a service to get them back. How can we do something about that? And so I was really excited about the possibilities that are here. There are many other possibilities that we've started to think about that are not in scope for the sake of this project, but you start to think about open access issues, and hearing some of what was going on in conversations in the plenaries the other day. There's a lot of possibilities here for connecting our materials back out to the community in a way that we can own that space, which we haven't been necessarily empowered to do with our existing tools. So I just put that out there. You can start to imagine all of the opportunities here. And as I already mentioned, we had 2 existing work types.
10 minutes.
Great. Okay, so what I want to do right now is just give you a sense of what this thing looks like and just how easy it is. And I'm just going to say, I can do this. If I can do this and set up a repository for any of my institutions, any of you could do it too. Again, I'll go through kind of what it looks like in terms of the branding that we've developed so far. And we're still very early days with this. We just started this project. Forgive some of the it's not, nice and splashy all the way yet. But I'm going to show you how easy it is to set up and create a new repository. We gave our multi-tenant instance of Haiku the name Commons Archive. This was sort of the name that we've been using. We may change that, so I'm just going to tell you that right now.
The worst part, names.
Names. What do you name? What is the project name versus what is the product name? What's the community name? And so it's probably going to shift to something like Haiku Commons. We wanted to give the idea that this is a place where our libraries are coming together, but then they're able to brand and set up their own domain and URL to the service anyway. So this is just kind of what our internal name has been so far. And when we share these slides out, there's actually a recording of the screenshots I'm going to show you in just a moment, so you can see how easy it is to actually set some of these things up. So when you pull Haiku down and it's out of the box and you first spin it up, this is what one of the tenants looks like. It's very basic, has a search box, you can have a place to share your works. Once you've got stuff loaded into the system, there's a list with little icons of the works that are featured here you can select. You can build collections, you can build sets of, administrative sets is what the terminology is in Haiku. but very, very simple, you know, and there's sort of just a plain old banner that shows up at the top. You log in and you have access to an administrative panel if you're an administrator. And this is actually what it looks like. So it's very, very simple in human language that anybody can understand. You can see what activity has happened. You can pull down reports. You can see what collections are here. You can see what works, works are considered the item level concept there. What's inside of your repository. You can build those collections in different ways and give permissions to different sets of collections. You can review submissions if that's part of your workflow. You can manage your users, manage your group. I mean, just really easy stuff to click on, and you know what to expect when you click that button. The thing that I want to focus on, though, is how easy the branding is now that we've developed some of that out with our partner Notch8. So, as I mentioned already, the branding piece was really key to us, and this is really where you can do some of that. And I know it's small, so those of you in the back, I'll just mention, you can add your logo, you can add your own banner image, you can add lots of different images in here and change the colors and the fonts. And then there's a whole section in here for custom CSS that it will just inherit whatever your CSS is for your library's website. It's very simple. You can add that in a few clicks. And again, I can do it. So here's an example, and again, very, very early days, just proof of concept at this point. But I work with, one of my members is the New School in New York City. And Alan Jones there actually was one of the ones who came to me about sort of, you know, can we work on electronic theses and dissertations? He was one of them. And we took a look at what their website looked like. They have kind of a funky website. They're a really great place to visit if you've never been there before. At the New School, they have a really cool library. And their website totally reflects that. They have kind of a funky website, which I really love. And so we wanted to see, can we get Haiku to look something like that? And this took not long, maybe 5 minutes to actually accomplish in terms of, you know, one thing that's not here is their logo is not here, and that's just because we just moved it. But you can see that the colors, everything is matching. Again, very, very simple, like under a minute. So this is Haiku, and up there, that's their library website. You can also create new repositories in under a minute. In fact, I timed myself just yesterday. I was like, Kirsten, I wonder how quickly I can do this. So I had logged into our administrative, our sort of super user account. I clicked on accounts, and then I clicked create new account. You type in a name, and it's there. And that's it. And then that whole tenant, everything is set up, and it inherits all of the settings that you've set at the multi-tenant level to for the institution. And then of course they can customize using all of the branding opportunities I just showed you, and customize workflows and so on. You do have to choose from the work types that already exist. So that is the conversation that we're having, especially related to OER and the metadata that's needed to support OER. There's no standard. And so we are actively working with the affordable learning community to develop standards and working with other groups that are trying to get OER content out there and make it available in a standardized way so that we can understand what's out there. One of our staff, Gretchen Gigan, who is our digital projects manager at PALCI and project manager for this project, she comes to us with a background from the Digital Public Library of America and has a lot of good experience in how you take all of these diverse sets of metadata and bring them together. And she's been fantastic for this project for that reason, especially related to OER. So again, this is where you type in a name, you can add your users, and you're done, and that's it. So that really was what we wanted to share with you today. We wanted to make sure we left plenty of time for questions. I think I left.
We have 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Sorry about that. But we will stick around,
Yep.
and if you have questions, very, very happy to answer them. So we are happy to answer any questions that anybody has right now. And I do want to call attention to Amanda Herford at PALNI. She's their scholarly communications director, and she's sort of our product owner who has just done so much work to make sure we're all marching in the right direction here, and she's been fabulous. So we've got a great team and really excited. So, any questions?
Oh, just call out real
sorry.
quick that haiku4consortia.org.
Oh, yes.
We're going to put project updates,
Haiku
but it's early
consortia.org.
days. Speaking of, I spun that up last Friday, I think.
Go ahead, Susan.
Thanks. Susan Stearns, Boston Library Consortium. When you started out, did you have a sense of what the business model for your members to participate in this would be? And if not, have you evolved that? Can you talk at all about that?
Do you want to?
Well, I mean, from PALNI's perspective, we don't charge for individual services. We have, this is what our costs are, we share it out, we have a cost sharing model. So this would just be part of the regular services that we already provide. And we do provide 2 services already. We found if we try to do anything around participation or whatever, your participation goes down squads.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
wasn't
but it is
asking
just
that,
cost
but
recovery.
it's just
And then
cost
between the
recovery.
2 of us,
Okay.
I mean, we've gotten some quotes for hosting costs when we go
Right.
forward.
Right.
Bandwidth costs are going to be another thing we're going to have to figure out, but because we're not using it live yet, we've not really seen.
Right.
The other thing is because it's open source, we can put it on any platform we want, and then one of the things we notice is that the nonprofit, I mean, we do development work, and so the nonprofit sites that we have to do this stuff, we get a better deal than some of the commercial people do. So it may be we put it on our own site and we can control costs that way as well.
And
So
what is
we don't
your-
know the cost yet, what we would do,
Okay.
but I mean,
Okay.
it really, it's whatever our costs are.
Really
Yeah,
but really inexpensive.
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
just in
yes.
terms of knowing what hosting costs for this are, I mean, we're talking very minuscule amounts
Yeah,
of money
yeah.
per institution per year, especially if it's shared across all of our institutions. We're still very much exploring that in my group. I'm not sure yet. We want to get a sense of what the total package is going to be, but hosting costs, it might be $1,100 a month shared across
Right.
many institutions.
Yeah, what we were looking at is, we were seeing prices for IR, around 24,000, depending on your size, more or less than that. We want the cost for the whole system to be
that
24,000
amount,
for as many
right.
people as we can scale into that system.
And that's
the
kind of
goal.
what we're expecting here.
And your timeline for actually moving into production?
So 18 months is our grant project timeline. As I mentioned, there's all these other projects that are happening tangentially at the same time, and we're trying to pull these things together. We hope to have something at the end of 18 months so that we can really test and make sure that it's going to work for everybody.
Because it's early days, there's like a massive amount of development, and so waiting for people to get their code contributed back to the Common Code and how it's going to go. Like the British Library did a search element of it, but they actually did it in external open source, still open source code, but it's external, and so we're trying to navigate, do we want theirs, do we want to do it in Haiku, and so there's a little bit of that going on, just because it's that phase where there's just massive amounts of stuff happening at the same time. But that's good that stuff is happening like that.
And are you open to other consortia joining? The Commons Archive at some point?
Whatever it's
Yes.
called,
Yes.
yes. We do, we want that. We want to get us to a point where we can have that conversation really, in a really productive way. I do want to also point out, there were recent announcements like UVA. We also just heard recently that EBSCO is planning to offer Haiku as an institutional repository solution out to people. So
As a slice.
As a slice. separate
Separate.
portfolio, but possible integrations. They're working together with Ubiquity Press. And so I just want to put that out there so that people know that they will be another one, and we're putting lots of pressure on them to contribute their code back to the community. So if anybody is having those conversations, please do the same. And I think they will. I think it's just a matter of timing, and yeah, so. It's being picked up by lots of other groups, which is exciting to see. We're not the only ones working on this, pocket project that we hope will do something.
And there's other initiatives, was the Bridge to Haiku.
Bridge to
So
Haiku,
people who are migrating in, the
Digital
metadata
library.
is the messy bit, right? Getting it in, so the project's working on that as well.
Right.
And accessibility?
Yeah, we took note of that.
We have talked with our developers about that, but we're gonna do more.
Yeah, we're gonna have to.
I was told I should always ask.
Yes, we were told that, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, again, let's do this together, right? Rather than the siloed,
Right.
make sure we get the hard work that's done there. There was another question.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I need to hog.
Yeah, go ahead.
I heard there was me?
Yeah.
Sorry, there was a Haiku Direct, but
Yes.
posted Haiku.
Right.
But that seems sort of stalled. I haven't heard anything more about it recently. Have you heard about that? So more for like one institution
That was the pilot that PALCI actually participated in as well. We were one of the pilot participants. We were the only consortium that did that, and the funding ran out. It was a one-year project that was funded in part by IMLS, and it was that partnership. They kind of let it sit and then have let other community members come in and pick up some of that work. And DuraSpace and some of the other partners there, they just weren't able to move forward with it without any funding. So we kind of picked that up
DuraSpace
and
went
built
to
on it.
Lyrasis though, so I don't know what, but at this
Right.
time, as far as I know, they have no plans yet. They're
Yeah.
waiting to kind of see how this proceeds. But, you know, I think there'll be opportunities for single libraries to join spaces like this, as well as, you know, EBSCO and other vendors that would be selling ubiquity slices. In that case, you are just buying a slice rather than a collaborative piece of it.
That's the hard thing for singleness, it's figuring out which direction.
Where you go.
Because there is so much happening in this space, but it's not quite at the level where you can just join in.
Right.
Right. Yeah, we're kind of trying to do what Haiku Direct was trying to do for consortial
Gotcha.
environments.
Well, and like I said, we've had this task force going every year, kind of surveying the landscape, and we finally said, darn it, the only way we're gonna get it is build it. So that's why, you know, getting a partner who could help us build the thing that we wanted to try to build, you know. And it, I would say it's going really well, so it's encouraging.
So I realize this is for us and for me to figure out, but if, you know, what would your advice be for a consortia who's pretty certain that when this becomes available, they're going to want to kind of partner and do, you know, between now and the time when it becomes available, like,
What's the prep for it?
yeah, like what would you do if you were just starting right now and this was available when you had started? I'm pretty new to my organization, but every meeting we have, we talk about the need for a repository.
Mhm.
And I was coming from a single institution where we had B-Press. One of our institutions hosts a D-Space, and actually 3 of them host a D-Space. But, you know, we're really at the consortial office getting out of sort of hosting things. And
Mhm.
so I'm just wondering what.
That's where that partnership, right? Well, who's
Yeah.
gonna, you know, how are we gonna manage this hosting together is kind of one of the goals. And the facilitation of the people is the key component of this as well. Like I said, you're putting in the intellectual capital and the way that you're doing it, but I don't know if you want.
Yeah, I mean, do some needs analysis, certainly. Come to the meetings, the interest group meetings are open. You can come and talk about what you see as a need, and then figure out who is the right group to partner with. They're open community. You just go to Sam Barry's website, anybody can join those. When we first started going, we felt like we were outsiders. It was a bunch of developers talking to each other. We just, you know, inserted ourselves there. And
That's good to know.
And it really changed the conversation, the types of conversations that were happening. We weren't just talking about code, but what was the end goal? And so having, you know, your group join into those definitely is a good way to get started. So
Thank you.
any other questions? I know we're over time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.